On June 28th, we were far in the ice, about 66 degrees 24 minutes north and 29 degrees 45 minutes west. We could see land to the north, northeast, northeast magnetic, and 2 mountain tops were especially prominent. However, we could not tell their real form since, owing to the looming or optical distortion so common over these ice fields, and due to the refraction of light through the different layers of warm and cold air, they were much altered and locked like abruptly truncated peaks rising out of an embrasured parapet. They must have been the peaks by the Blosseville coast, though they lay more to the west than those marked on the map. I had a talk afterwards with Captain Iverson of the Skjærkodder, who had been further into the ice to the north. He could there see land quite distinctly. A very mountainous coast. This was probably at about 68 degrees north latitude. Not low as it was farther down, at about 67 degrees north latitude, where he had been in near shore in the year 1884. This account agrees to some extent with the description which Captain Holm had from the Eskimo of Angmag Salik, and on which he based his sketch of the east coast farther north. This shore, in fact, is one of the least known regions on the earth. On the evening or June 28th, we saw a great number of seal far in among the ice. About this time we used to see them daily, but could never get at them. On July 3rd we at last got a long way in amid a quantity of seal, but the ice lay so close that it was impossible to work the boats, and we consequently got nothing. In the middle of the night, when the sun gets down to the horizon, one can see a long way and very distinctly across the fields of ice. One night I went up to the masthead to look at the seal. I turned my glasses towards land and saw them in greater numbers than I remember to have ever seen them before. They lay, as the mate said, scattered about the ice like coffee. From northeast to northwest, wherever I turned my glasses, there were seal lying as close as grains of sand, stretching away to the horizon, and probably much further still, and the further away they were, the thicker they seemed to be. It was glorious to see such an amount of life. The seal are not yet extinct, but they have learned wisdom, have altered their habits, and retired to the remoter pack ice, and we get none of them. Next day was foggy, and the floes lay closer still, while the swell of the sea began to reach us. In the course of the afternoon we got out of the ice again. On July hat the ice was moving violently, as we had come into one of the stronger currents. As 2 or 3 of us were sitting in the mess room, the Jason was struck so heavily by a floe on the bows that she was literally driven back. We rushed out and saw another big floe advancing with great speed upon her quarter. The shock comes, the whole vessel quivers and heels over. We hear a crash and the rudder is gone, but luckily the damage is no worse. Had the floe struck us full in the side, there is no telling what might have happened, as it would have found the sealer's weakest point. Next day we spent fixing the spare rudder, which these vessels always carry, and we were soon as seaworthy as before. But the summer was now so far advanced that there was little prospect of our getting more seals, so on July 13th it was resolved, to the satisfaction of us all, to leave the ice and make westwards for Greenland. That day, however, and the next, we did get some seal, in all about 100, which we passed on the outer ice. On the night of the 14th, the mate had sighted land, and the same again in the morning, and then at no very great distance. Later, however, it grew foggy, and we could not tell how near we were, though we thought we could not be far off, as we had been sailing all day towards it in open water. Our baggage is brought up upon deck, all preparations are made for our departure, and our dispatches and letters are written. Towards dinner time, as I sit down below busy with my correspondence, I hear the magic word land from the deck. I rush up, and a glorious sight meets my eyes. It seemed, so to say, to set the finest chords of my heart vibrating. Right before me, through the veil of mist, lay the sunlit shore of Greenland, the glorious array of peaks which lie to the north of Cape Dan. Engolfsfjeld is especially prominent, but further to the north there seem to be still higher tops. Never have I seen a landscape of more savage beauty, or nature in wilder confusion, than here. A landscape of sharp peaks, ice and snow. We were probably about 35 miles from land, but as we see ice ahead, we turn southwards, continually drawing nearer. It looks as if we could get right into shore down by Cape Dan, as the belt here trends inwards. But as we get nearer, we find that there is more ice than we expected. On our way south, we pass several enormous icebergs, and on one or two of them, we saw rocks. When one first sees these monsters at a distance, they look like tracts of land, and several times we thought we saw islands lying right ahead, though when we came nearer, we found them to be nothing but ice. South of Cape Dan especially were numbers of these giants lying aground. However, we could make no attempt to land that day nor on the next. There was too much ice, the belt being from 15 to 20 miles wide, and it seemed better to see how things looked further south. On the 16th, we passed Cape Dan, which is unmistakable with its round dome-like form. The ice still lay far out to sea, the belt being over 15 miles in width. Further west, however, the blue tint of the air suggests that there is a deep inlet stretching landwards. We pin our hopes on this channel, make for it, and in the course of the night actually reach it. When I came upon deck on the morning of the 17th, I saw plainly enough that the landing must be attempted that day, and a climb to the masthead only served to strengthen my resolve. The mountains round Sermilikfjord lay enticingly before us. Further west we could see the inland ice, the goal of our aspiration, stretching far inwards in a white undulating plain. This was the first time we had come within sight of it. It could not have been much more than 10 or 12 miles to the nearest land, and for the first bit the ice was fairly practicable. Further in, certainly it seemed to be somewhat closely packed, but I could see small pools here and there, and on the whole the ground looked as if it might well have been worse. At places I could see a good deal of small ice, which makes the portage of the boats difficult though. Again, it is better to deal with than the larger floes, which are often hard to move when it is a case of forcing the boats through the water. But what especially struck me as making the outlook hopeful was the reflection from open water, which I could see from the masthead beyond the ice and between it and land. The probability, therefore, was that when we had broken our way through the middle of the ice belt, where the floes lay closest, we should then find looser ice, merging into the open water beyond. It would no doubt have been an easy matter for a boat like the Jason to push her way through this little belt, for often before we had gone through much worse ice. But then it had been a case of seal, the real business of the ship, while now things were in a somewhat different position. Had the vessel been mine, I should not have hesitated a moment about taking her in, but we were only guests on board, and besides, she was not insured against the risks of effecting a landing in Greenland, The currents and soundings of these waters are as yet unknown, and if the Jason were to lose her propeller in the ice, she would probably be gone beyond all chance of salvation. She could not well supply its place, and worst of all, in case the ship had to be abandoned here, it might be very difficult for her crew of 64 men to make their way to inhabited parts with the small stock of provisions they had on board. And furthermore, as I believed that we could get through without help, I never thought for an instant of asking the captain to take us further than to the edge of the ice, but gave orders to have our things packed and the boats got ready. As I have already said, we had brought one boat with us, which had been specially made for us in Christiania. But as this would have been heavily laden with the somewhat voluminous equipment of the expedition, I gladly accepted the captain's kind offer of one of the Jasori's smaller sealing boats. So we had the two lowered and brought alongside, and there arose an unusual bustle on board with the opening of our cases and the packing of the boats. I cannot say which were more eager to help, the members of the expedition or the ship's crew, but I think I may assert with confidence that the eagerness of the latter was not due to their anxiety to see the last of us, but to simple goodwill of the most unselfish kind. The last touches were given to our dispatches and home letters, and if any of us had a specially dear friend to whom he wished to send a final farewell, it was sent, I take it, for it was not quite certain when the next meeting would be. But my companion seemed in a particularly cheerful humour, and there was no consciousness to be seen in the little band of preparation for a serious struggle, nor was this to be wondered at, seeing that after 6 weeks of waiting and longing, the hour of release was now at hand. The sensation which the sight of land that morning gave me was nothing short of delicious. As I then wrote to a friend, our prospects looked brighter than I had ever dared to hope. I had a sense of elasticity, as when one is going to a dance and expecting to meet the choice of one's heart. A dance indeed we had, but not on the floor of roses which we could have wished, and our heart's choice certainly kept us a long time waiting. Towards 7 o'clock in the evening, everything is ready for our start. Sermilik Fjord lies now straight in front of us. According to the results of cross bearings taken from points on shore, we ought to be about 9 miles from its mouth. I go up to the masthead for the last time to see where the ice looks easiest, and what will be our best course. The reflection of open water beyond the ice is now more clearly visible than before. In a line somewhat west of Kong Oscar's Havn, the ice seems most open, and I determine to take that course. More confident than ever, I descend to the deck, and now the hour of departure is at hand. The whole of the Jason's crew were assembled. In spite of our joy at the prospect of a successful start, I think it was with much regret that we bid farewell to these brave sea folk, with whom we had now spent 6 weeks, and among whom we had each of us found many a faithful friend, who at this moment assumed a doubtful air, or turned away his head with an expressive shake. No doubt they thought they would never see us again. We shook hands with Captain Jacobsen last of all, and in his calm, quiet way this typical Norwegian sailor bid us a kind farewell and wished us Godspeed. Then down the ladder we went and into the boats. I took charge of our Jason boat with Dietrichson and Balto at the oars, while Sverdrup steered the other with Ravna and Christiansen. Ready? Give way then. And as the boats rush through the dark water before the first vigorous strokes, the air rings with 3 lusty cheers from 64 voices, and then come 2 white clouds of smoke as the Jason's guns send us our last greeting. The report rolls heavily out into the thick, saturated air, proclaiming to the silent, solemn world of ice around us that we have broken the last bridge which could take us back to civilization. Henceforth we shall follow our own path. Then goodbye, and our boats glide with regular strokes into the ice to meet the first cold embrace of that nature which for a while is to give us shelter. All of us had the most implicit faith in our luck. We knew that exertion and danger awaited us, but we were convinced that we must and should get the better of them. When we had got some way into the ice, a boat and 12 men in charge of the second mate overtook us. They had been sent by Captain Jacobsen to help us as far as they could the first part of the way by dragging our boats or forcing a passage. They kept with us for a while, but when I saw they could be of very little use to us as we worked our way through as fast as they did, I thanked them for their kindness and sent them back. We then reach a long stretch of slack ice, wave farewell to the boat, and push on with unabated courage.